A steal by Tippett. The game on his stick. He scores! OT in OT. Tippett wins it for Philadelphia.
This is episode 108 of the Liberty-O. Danny Deemer here with Chris Stumpo.
As always, how are you, buddy?
Well, we have been better. We will start the episode by saying that. Definitely not feeling the best today, but overall, I'm good. How about you?
I mean, physically, from a sickness standpoint, yeah. I mean, me and you are a Michael Jordan flu game in this shit right now because I feel like absolute trash. But from a hockey perspective, dude, I'm so ready for this trade deadline. I'm so ready for what's going to come. And it's kind of weird because last time we talked, I was so confident and, yeah, Walker's gone, Seeler's gone. But now, I don't know if it's just Danny Briere playing his cards or lying like he does before about how he was actually really in on Ryan Leonard, but then they went and got Michkov. So I don't know if this is him just like posturing himself for the trade deadline in 4 days or if we're really about to re-sign a couple guys. So excited and nervous is probably the two words that I would probably use in terms of hockey related. But yeah, from the sickness standpoint, dude, I feel like shit.
Dude, they're definitely excited for the trade deadline. It's pretty worrying getting mixed signals 5 days before the deadline when the messaging has unanimously stayed the same the entire year. To get a mixed signal a week before, it's a bit of a red flag. But
it's weird.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're going to judge the full body of work when it happens. I really don't think there's a point to getting too worked up and jumping to conclusions because I could sit here and complain about them not making a move, but if they go out and make a move tomorrow, then I look stupid, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. There's no need to panic or get mad over something that hasn't happened yet. You know what I mean? So, and it's not just the Flyers, right? It's not just Danny Briere that's not really doing anything right now. It's the entire NHL. Like I made that NHL trade deadline tracker. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to just put down all these big trades. And when we saw the Monahan trade, we saw the Lindholm trade, and then like the Tanev trade to Dallas, and then everything stopped. And even Jim Jackson on the broadcast the last game, he was like, it's kind of weird considering how close we are to the trade deadline, and maybe this means that trade deadline is going to be like 10 times crazier than we're normally used to. But in terms of how silent it is right now on the trade front, it is kind of weird. It makes me think that teams are, I don't know if this is just me throwing shit at the wall and seeing if it sticks, but I kind of think it's maybe teams are so deep into trade talks that no rumors are getting out and teams are really trying to just work that out. I don't know. It is really odd to not see anything happen 4 days before, but I mean, we still have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then obviously Friday. What time is it? 3:00 it ends, I think?
Yep, Eastern.
So we can't really, like you said, you can't be on pins. I mean, I am on pins and needles, but you can't freak out over something that hasn't happened yet. But trust me, if Sean Walker wants what, a 5th year, that's where the discrepancy is. Seeler wants a little bit more money. Like I think I would give the money to Seeler. I think he's earned it. What's he want? 2 years, 3 years? I mean, he's like what, 31, 30, 32 years old. He's not that old. I mean, I'll take him as a bottom pair defenseman for $3.2 million at max. Like I'm okay with that. Sean Walker, and I'm sorry, like if this is gonna upset people, I mean I really don't care. I mean we're gonna have Anthony on soon. He's gonna come in and talk about what he's hearing, but he wants a 5th year. What? I'm sorry. It's just you're a 29-year-old. I mean I've said this on the pod before. You're a 29-year-old defenseman having an outlier season, a career year. You're obviously going to be looking to get the bag, which, I mean, I can't sit here and blame him as a person. I mean, if I was in his shoes, I would be doing the exact same thing. I'm not blaming his agency for going out and trying to get their client more money, but from a team aspect, from where we are, and like you said, what we've been hearing for months now, and don't fall in love with these guys, from Tortorella himself, don't fall in love with these guys. We're rebuilding. We're looking to the future, blah, blah, blah. If you give a 29-year-old defenseman who's having a career year 5 years at what's he probably want, $4 or $5 million? I'm sorry. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, I think he needs to get moved. Not to switch to the Laughton thing quickly, but Laughton apparently, their asking price is extremely high there, so there's been no movement on him. And I can't blame them for starting high and being like, hey, give us a first and a prospect, and teams are balking at that. I mean, I can't blame Briere for starting high. But if you're genuinely like shielding this guy away from teams because you refuse to take less than a first round pick for Scott Laughton, and don't get me wrong, Scott Laughton's a great locker room guy. He's great for the city. Good dude. He's on a really team friendly contract. I wouldn't mind keeping him, but if you're really balking at the fact that teams won't give you a first, like if a team's offering a second or a third and a B level prospect, then I think you do it, dude. Like I think it's time to move on. It's time to shed. It's time to get some picks in here. And I understand the team's in a playoff spot right now, and it might quote unquote send the wrong message to the players. But why do we act like these players don't know what's been going on since the beginning of the season? You know what I mean? Like the transparency from the front office. These guys aren't dumb. Like even Tortorella has come out and said, "Hey, these guys know it's a business. These guys know where we are from an organizational standpoint. So you can't get upset if you move a couple guys. I mean, like if moving Scott Laughton and Sean Walker makes you less of a playoff team, then you really weren't a serious playoff team to begin with, right?
Yeah, I don't know why we do this every year. I don't know why we do
year
the same song and dance with Scott Laughton every year. As soon as I saw the rumor mill start drying up and the asking price is too high, I was like, oh my God, here we go again. Yeah. And then next year it'll be the same thing. And then watch, it'll probably not happen until his value is completely gone. And then it's ridiculous.
Until he takes 4 penalties in a row and then doesn't score for a week and a half. And then we'll be like, yeah, now we're kind of looking to trade him.
And I get the whole send the right messaging to the players, but I mean, let's be honest, they're not winning the Stanley Cup. Like the front office knows that as well. So
I hope so.
Who cares about the opinions of guys who won't even be here in 2 to 3 years? Like this is about helping them at the end of the day. Like Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, like it's about making the team better for you guys long term. Like you like the playoffs this year? Well, we want you in them every year, not just this year.
And like you're still, I don't think trading away a Sean Walker or a Scott Laughton or a Nick Seeler. I mean, Nick Seeler has been fantastic this year. Don't get me wrong. I mean, those 3 block shots at the end of the game last game was just incredible. He's been really good. Like there's no doubt about that. But I just don't understand the process. Like if you trade away those guys, like do you think the cup runs off? Like there was never a cup run to begin with. Like do I want them to make the playoffs? Absolutely, no doubt about it. Do I want them to give Carolina or whoever they verse a really hard series? 1,000%. And do I think they could still do that without those 3 guys or without those 2 guys or without one of those guys? Yeah, absolutely. I hear time and time again how strong this room is, how strong the chemistry between these guys are. You really think trading away one of these guys, knowing where they are from an organizational standpoint, would break the room? Like obviously it wasn't that strong of a room if that would break the room. If Scott Laughton going to a serious cup contending team would break the room so much where they would just fall flat on their faces. You know what I mean? Like you just named Couturier captain. He's the room. He's not going anywhere, especially with his play lately. But I just don't get the understanding that like, oh, if you trade away these guys, the cup runs off. Like people aren't saying that exactly, but just like the exaggeration that's coming from the idea of trading these guys away is just asinine to me. I mean, that's me personally. People can have their own opinion. They're totally entitled to it. But from where I'm looking at things is just Sean Walker has absolutely played himself into getting a pretty good package back. I mean, he makes really, him and Seeler together, they make no money at all. Let me go and look. Sean Walker, he's got 1 year left. He's an unrestricted free agent next year. He makes $2.65. And then Nick Seeler makes $775,000. So I'm not surprised he's looking for a little bit more money. But if you can package those 2 guys up and possibly bring back a first-round pick plus a prospect, I don't see how Danny Briere balks at that. I don't see how you don't look into the future and go, okay, does it hurt my team right now? I mean, yeah. Obviously taking a guy who played top 4 minutes out of the lineup, both guys who play top 4 minutes out of the lineup would hurt you in the short run, but I don't think they'd fall flat on their faces to the point where they wouldn't make the playoffs, you know?
No, I mean, look around at the Metropolitan Division. We might just get in due to the faults of the other franchises. Like they all suck. They're all we have padding. That's what I don't get. It'd be different if we were in desperation mode or a couple
Yeah,
points out or something like that. But we have some padding going into the deadline, going into the playoffs. Like I think we're not locked in, but odds are
definitely
in
not
our
locked.
favor. Odds are most certainly favorable for us to make the playoffs, and I don't understand why they're so concerned about this messaging as if like everything's gonna go off the rails. Like
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
a
like, do
month
you
after the
really
trade
think
deadline, they'll be in the playoffs.
like you
Uh,
really think trading away these guys would deter the team so much that they wouldn't make the playoffs on the path that they're on right now? Like the Eastern Conference right now, the Atlantic, the wild card pitcher, the Atlantic, you got the Panthers with 86 points, and you got Boston with 84, Toronto with 78. Those are the three in the Atlantic. Metropolitan, you obviously have the Rangers who have 84 points. They've been really good this year. Carolina, who I feel like every time I see one of those graphics where it's like, if the playoffs started today, this would be your opponent. And it's always them. So they have 78. And then we're right there with 71. And then the two wildcard teams are Detroit with 72, and then Tampa with 72. And then, of course, you have the Penguins who just got destroyed last night by the Oilers, who only have, let's see, 62 points. So they are 10 points out of a wildcard 2 spot with only 4 games on hand on Tampa. So, and 2 games on hand on Detroit. So, even that, like, great point. Even those guys, the Devils keep shooting themselves in the foot. Pittsburgh keeps shooting themselves in the foot. The Islanders, they don't worry me, but like they've been kind of good lately. Patrick Waugh, ever since he took over there, I don't think they've been amazing, but their last 10, they are 5-3-2. They're on a 3-game win streak. Like they could make a run for the wild card 2 spot. But right now, I mean, I'm looking at the division. I mean, I never thought I'd be saying this March 4th to you, but March, the conference. Looking at the conference or the division? Yeah, the division. I'm sorry, Metropolitan. That's what I'm looking at right now because you have the Islanders who are right behind us with 66 points, so they're 5 points behind us. Washington's at 65. That was a big game that we lost against them. Completely just fell apart in that game. I don't know if you want to go over that game too much. Honestly, kind of pissed me off, but I'm not too worried. Like you said, I don't think trading away a couple guys for future considerations, not future considerations, but for future assets and a B- prospect or potentially a first. I mean, you never know. I mean, when we saw what Tanner Jeannot got last year, I mean, playoff teams who are shooting for the cup do not give a fuck about first round picks. They do not give a fuck about prospects that probably won't see the top 6 because they already have those guys in the top 6. So I really do think that he, as in Danny Briere, could capitalize on this. But I don't know. It's interesting, man. Like I'm really interested to see if what you said in the last episode about, hey, like if your plan all along was to change course if we were better than expected, then why didn't you just say it out loud? I'm really interested to see if the transparency stays the same as it did in the beginning of the year. That's what I'm looking for personally.
Me too. This is a huge moment. By Friday, the outlook of this regime could be entirely different. The honeymoon phase could be over for more people. It already is for some. Yeah, man, I agree. And as far as those teams below us, we get one more crack at pretty much all of them except for Pittsburgh, I think. Pretty sure in April we play Islanders, Devils, and Washington all at home. So
Ooh,
if it comes
that should
down
be
to
fun.
that, then I'm here for that. That's basically a playoff game anyway. So
Yeah. Hey, I mean, wait, you said no Pittsburgh? Let me look at the
I don't believe so. No.
Let me look at the schedule real quick. But I'm just like I said, I'm really interested to see what Briere does, who he moves, if he moves anybody. Like I heard they're in the running for. I mean, and Anthony's going to hop on soon, and he's going to talk to us about what they're really in the running for. I mean, you've heard the rumors that they're in kind of not talks, but they're interested in a veteran forward or a backup goalie, and I wouldn't mind the backup goalie if it's a goalie with term and somebody that they would have targeted in the summer. Like if they bring a guy in with 3 years left on his deal, and it would have been a guy that they would have went after in the summertime to kind of help Erson, because you got Alexei Kolosov, who probably will come over after his season's over in the KHL, but that guy's not going to get thrown into the fire in a playoff situation in the NHL after coming from the KHL in a different size rink. Like, he'll go to the Phantoms and he'll probably spend the rest of the year there. So like, if that's their plan to get a backup goalie, I wouldn't be too mad. Like, I could see people freaking the fuck out, like, oh, they're buying. But I mean, you have to look at it from a certain standpoint. Like, if they trade away a fourth or a fifth or a third or a fourth for a backup goalie with term to help Erson next year, I mean, you can't really get too mad at that, right?
No, especially given the uncertainty of the goalie position in the organization. I would be. It's like we weren't expecting that to be an issue going into this trade deadline, but it is. So
yeah,
and it would help, like you said, if you put term alongside it, it answers questions for next year too. So yeah, I'm not too concerned with that and like labeling that as, oh, we're buying. That's just like cookie cutter deadline moves that any team in a playoff spot would make. You know, I don't even consider that buying, really. Like, buying would be going out and getting a rental, actually sacrificing. I don't really think this is sacrificing.
Going out and spending actual assets on somebody who a playoff, a cup aspiring team would probably go trade for, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. To me, it boils down to, it has to be at least Walker. I would like Laughton. Like, very preferable. Very preferable. And it's not because I dislike Scott Laughton. I like Scott Laughton. And if he was in the playoff run with us this year, I'd be fine with that. But I don't know. Some team's going to overpay for that guy. So just do it. Why not?
I mean, I would hope so, dude. Because, I mean, I was just talking to Derek about this. That dude has been on this team for so long, man. Like, I genuinely, so long. It's ridiculous.
It's been 11 years.
It's crazy, dude. It actually is kind of crazy how long he's been on this team. But like you said, if preferably, yeah, I mean, preferably, dude, I would want all these guys going, to be honest with you, except Seeler. Like, Sealer's the only one out of all of them that I'm kind of like, hey, like, really wouldn't mind him staying. You know what I mean? Like,
agreed. He might be more beneficial on your team than offloading him.
Well, think about it. He's not going to command insane money. He's not asking for the money that Walker's asking for. He's a fine bottom pair defenseman. Derek made a great point. We don't have anybody in the organization from a defensive standpoint that can block the shots that he does, kill plays in his zone, and just play a defensive game like him. I mean, Adam Ginning. Like who else do we have? I mean, not much. So he's the one guy where I'm like, okay, yeah, like I can see it. Like I wouldn't be totally mad if they handed him like a 2-3 year deal to come back for a couple of years. That I don't care about. But handing a guy who, I mean, let's be honest with you, like, he's having a career year here, and he can't blame him for having the money. I just went over this, but it really doesn't make sense for me.
He was basically a throw-in in the Provorov trade. Essentially a throw-in, for lack of a better term. Like, I know that's like a lazy way of labeling him, but we weren't expecting this. We weren't expecting the year he had, and he just came off an injury in which last season he was getting back into his groove, and this season he finally like fully recovered, starts to take off a little bit. But who's to say that doesn't become an issue again? I mean, what if you sign him to 5 years and he gets a core injury? Like, that's insane to think about, that we're just going to be holding on to that guy until he's 34 with core injury on defense. But
yeah, and I saw somebody, I forget who it was, but they were on the timeline and they were saying, and this is not me saying it because I personally don't know because I haven't followed Sean Walker's career, but apparently this is like one of the first seasons that he stayed healthy the entire time. I don't know how true that is. But yeah, I mean, that's a great point to make. I mean, that is worrisome. I mean, you sign a guy who is having a career year, gets the bag, and then turns around and would potentially, I mean, I'm not saying he gets hurt, but if that happen, I mean, that would just be extremely, I mean, bad luck, first of all, but it would be just the Flyers' luck, right? If they handed him the fucking deal and then he got hurt next year after not getting hurt the entire season this year. Like, oh yeah, you had the career year, perfect timing, and then you signed the extension. I just personally think it would go against everything that they've been saying for a really long time. And
absolutely.
I'm really
I could see that going so south. That's so different from the Travis Konechny debate or whatever. The Sean Walker, it really does not make sense, especially when you went out and got a Jamie Drysdale. I mean, most of the year we're running 11-7. It's like it really just never made sense. He's the odd man out. Him or Risto, like, let's be real, but it doesn't seem like, sorry for that screaming, but it doesn't seem like, yeah, it's like a little kid outside, but it doesn't seem like there's any more smoke to the Risto thing. And he was injured too, so it's got to be Walker.
He seems more of a he seems like more of a off-season kind of move, especially considering that he's hurt right now, so you can't really trade him, obviously. But that's an interesting topic. I mean, we talked about that last episode. Like, if they end up trading Walker or signing Walker, right? It's like a 4-year extension worth like $5 million. And then they turn around and they trade Risto next year, but they retain $2 million because whatever GM trades for him sees him at a certain value. Then you essentially just spent like $7 million to keep Sean Walker. So we do have Anthony here. Really interested to see what he says, because I mean, he is our guy in terms of Flyers inside news. So Anthony, can you hear us?
Yeah, got you loud and clear. Do you guys got me?
Yeah, how are you?
Not too bad, boys. What's going on?
Not much, man. I appreciate you coming on, spending a little time with us.
Oh, no worries. It's been actually a minute since I did a podcast in any capacity, so it's kind of good to get back in the saddle a bit.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. We're actually just in the middle of talking about Sean Walker and that whole thing. Extension trade. It's kind of a whole back and forth. So what do you have on him?
I mean, it's been kind of in a holding pattern since Friday. I mean, there has been some traction, obviously, since the Chris Tanev deal and the Ilya Lyubushkin deal that kind of got the ball rolling on the defensive market. Talks picked up. Like, the Edmonton Oilers are a team that have been routinely connected to Sean Walker. I mean, I think the Flyers have an idea of what Edmonton would be willing to give up, but they haven't made a formal offer. Like, this isn't a situation where Danny Briere has an offer sitting on his desk and he's just waiting to whether or not sign Walker or take that offer. Yeah. It's really coming down to, will Edmonton or any other team for that matter, I don't want to make it sound like it's just the Edmonton Oilers. There are a ton of teams in on both Walker and Seeler, but they're trying to weigh, is the offer good enough to forego re-signing Walker and effectively cutting out the legs from under that back end. So it's like they're negotiating with the Walker camp, but they're also negotiating with the teams interested in his services. So it's like a double negotiation right now, and the Flyers are just in the middle trying to make it all work.
Now, I think I've heard this from you. I'm not sure if it was you, but like Walker and Seeler as a pair, or was Edmonton also one of those teams? Because I know Dallas was interested in those as a pair, right?
Yeah. So Dallas was the main team in on it. As sorry, my cat was in the corner.
No, you're good.
Around. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, Dallas was the main team in on both. Obviously, they elected to go a different route with Chris Tanev. I believe it was the Edmonton Oilers, but that's more me piecing stuff together. It's not, I didn't hear that specifically, but I believe Edmonton was the other team that at least inquired about getting both. I mean, I look at Edmonton, and I think if you bring in both those guys, like, you have a back end that's arguably ready to win a Stanley Cup, because, you theoretically plug Sean Walker in beside Darnell Nurse, bumping Cody Ceci out. And I'd venture to guess that any deal to bring in Sean Walker or any defenseman of any capacity into Edmonton would involve Cody Ceci going out the door. And then you bring in a left shot guy to kind of replace Vincent Desharnais or Brett Kulak and really kind of upgrade your defense and really make it 5D deep. So I would imagine that Edmonton is the other team that was probably in. on both those guys. But I think that the asking price from the Flyers, which was a first and a second round pick and remains the same, was just too much for any team to really bite on.
And that asking price, first and a second, was for both Seeler and Walker, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you wanted both those guys, it was going to be a first and a second round pick. Now you could probably break that up and say they want a first round pick for Walker and they want a second round pick for Seeler. Again, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I'm pretty sure that's where it kind of lies and where the Flyers value them. But I would be surprised if a team hasn't already let the Flyers know that they would give up a second round pick for Nick Seeler. I think of the two, Nick Seeler is the one that the Flyers would prefer to keep, not just because of what it will cost to keep him, which will be less than Sean Walker, but also because it will. Sorry, my phone is going nuts right now. But also because I think he means more to that culture. And not to say that Sean Walker doesn't mean a lot to that culture, but John Tortorella's comments were very indicative of the way he feels. And I think taking Nick Seeler away from that team would damage a lot of the culture that they've built this year. So, I mean, if I had to bet, it's going to be a tougher task getting Nick Seeler out of Philadelphia than Sean Walker, relatively speaking. Because if a team steps up with a first for Nick Seeler, well, then I think that would be pretty tough to pass up on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire Flyers Twitter would go into shambles if we found out that Briere said no to a first-round pick for Nick Seeler. I mean, as good as he's been this year, because, I mean, he's been – and this is coming from somebody who wasn't huge on him 2-3 years ago, and I don't think anybody was. Like, the guy's completely shifted his entire career around. I mean, he was, on the waiver wire, like 3 years ago? So, if you say no to a first-round pick despite how good he's been, I think Flyers Twitter would go up in flames.
Yeah. And look, he's a guy that's tough as nails, that's prototypical type of defenseman that teams overpay for at the deadline. Ben Sherratt fetching a first round pick, with David Savard fetching a first round pick. Josh Manson went for a second round pick and a decent prospect. Like, these tough, rugged defensemen pending UFAs are exactly what these teams want. And, I was speaking to a GM the other I think it was last week at this point. I'm sorry, my mind's all over the place with my phone the past few days. But he was telling me that in today's NHL, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, you can only have one defenseman under 6 feet. And that's a thing. Like, you look at the back end of the Vegas Golden Knights last year, like, they were all monsters. You look at the Colorado Avalanche, Samuel Girard was injured for their cup run. The only guy standing under 6 feet, I believe, was Cale Makar. And he's no slouch by any stretch, but you had Josh Manson back there, both Jack and Eric Johnson back there, Bowen Byram, Devon Tays, even the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, that's one of the bigger back ends in the NHL back when they were winning their Stanley Cups, with Hedman and Sergachev, McDonough, Chernak, Bogosian, Luke Shen, David Savard was mixed in as well. So I think when you see a guy like Nick Seeler, who's making $775,000, and if you prorate that at 50%, you can squeeze him into any cap situation, and teams are licking their chops. And he's not just a lug back there. Like, he's been an effective defenseman, and I would say teetering on a all day long top 4 defenseman, obviously partner dependent. But I mean, if you could bring Nick Seeler in at the right cost and kind of plug him on your third pair as your number 5, like, it's tough to do better, especially for the cost against the cap.
I mean, how much credit can you give to Bradshaw for his turnaround too? Seeler, that is.
Bradshaw's just been amazing. Like, look at Rasmus Ristolainen. And look, not to say that Rasmus Ristolainen is a Norris Trophy winner, but he's turned into an effective number 5-ish defenseman, rock solid back there, good in the corners, brings those intangibles. And you look at a lot of defensemen that have really turned the corner under Bradshaw's tutelage, like Sean Walker. He was a cap casualty. He was a cap throw-in to make the money work for in the Ivan Provorov trade. Look at Travis Sanheim. Like, I do think Ivan Provorov's departure really opened the door for Travis Sanheim to blossom. But based on all these prospects that are going to be coming up over the next several years, Bradshaw is going to be very, very important, because you look up front, aside from Matvei Michkov, the Flyers don't have much coming. All of their talented prospects and younger forwards are on the roster already. The more significant guys that they're expecting to make the jump in the next 2-3 years are on the back end, whether that be Emile Andre. They're very high on Hunter McDonald, obviously Oliver Bonk. Like, these are names that they're expecting to really be maybe not necessarily impact players, although that's very subjective, but just to be effective guys at the NHL level, especially in the way of Bonk. So Bradshaw has been very important for the guys they already have on their roster and will be even more so important going forward.
Especially, I mean, you can see how much they like Bonk. I mean, he was drafted and then was handed his ELC, like, what, months after he was drafted, I think?
Yeah, shortly thereafter, he was signed to his ELC, and obviously they passed up on, was it Perot that they passed up on, and everyone was having a conniption. But, Keith Jones, the second he was brought in as president of hockey ops, he made it a point to talk about that back end. And you have an option to draft a right shot center at that size with that offensive upside in the first round. And I think it was too much for them to pass up on. And to this point, I think that it was the right choice. And look, they could stand to use Perot, like, obviously, especially with the departure of Cutter Gauthier. They really don't have a lot of offensive talent coming aside from Matvei Michkov. I mean, you have Denver Barkey, Cole Knuble, Massimo Rizzo's had an impressive season, but is he just, taking advantage of being an overager at the NCAA level? Like, they've really addressed trying to inject some talent into that back end on the prospect pool side. And I think that Bonk to this point was the right-ish pick. I mean, we won't really know that until 3-4 years down the road.
Yeah.
But they've certainly made it a point to address that back end. And it's something that they've been trying to address pretty much since the days of Chris Pronger and Kimmo Timonen.
Yeah. What really confuses me with the whole parole thing is because they knew about this whole Cutter Gauthier situation months and months and months before, right? Like, before the draft happened. So, I mean, you knew you were eventually probably going to lose a forward. And maybe they didn't know at the draft. Like, maybe they were still trying to work out what was going on. I mean, we still don't really know what happened with Cutter Gauthier. Not that I care. But
yeah, I mean, like, look, like, I think they really started getting an idea probably when he didn't show up to rookie camp, which was post-draft. Obviously, the cracks in the foundation started sometime last spring, shortly after the regime change. I mean, look, as far as the Cutter Gauthier thing goes, like, we'll never truly know exactly what happened, but your point does still stand that without him around, like, that leaves a massive hole and a massive void up front for them because, I think the expectation is that he'll probably turn pro before season's end, maybe get some games in with the Anaheim Ducks. But here's the thing is that he's not going to be a center at the NHL level, but he's probably going to be a perennial 40-goal scorer. And that's exactly what the Flyers need. And obviously the Jamie Drysdale era has not got off to the best of starts, not play-wise, but, like, I mean, he's clearly needs to grow into that body a bit, has dealt with some injuries going back to his time in Anaheim. I think that obviously his defensive game is a major work in progress, but
absolutely,
it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for Flyers fans. Obviously, when you see Gauthier come in and probably ride shotgun with either Leo Carlsson or Mason McTavish, and he's going to benefit from that. Like, the Flyers don't have anything comparing to McTavish or Leo Carlsson, so you also have to take that into consideration. But it's certainly going to be tough because they've been clamoring for a goal scorer in Philadelphia for how long, and Cutter Gauthier is just that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where the frustration, I guess you could say, from Flyers fans. Like, to go back on my point, you said the development camp, him not showing up, was kind of like the crack. Like, okay, like, that's kind of got the ball rolling, right? If you knew that was going to happen, and I mean, we just talked about how the forward side is depleted, right? The defensive side on the team now, and even in the prospect pool, it's pretty good. Like, Andrea, Adder, McDonald are huge on. Drysdale, Yorkie, like, they have guys defensively. So that pick, I'm not saying it's a bad pick, but it really does make you scratch your head from an organizational standpoint. Like, if you knew that you were going to lose a forward with that caliber of play, like, he's probably going to be a 30-40 goal scorer, as much as our boy Derek hates on him now, but shout out Derek. It is kind of like a puzzling, like, they must have really liked Bonk, no? If you knew you were going to lose a forward and Peralt's sitting right there. I mean, Peralt's the best player on that team, in my opinion. Like, Cutter Gauthier is good, don't get me wrong. Gabe Perreault is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, this is Gabe Perreault was a guy that I think they could have stood to use. And is he a center?
No, he's a winger.
Yeah, and look, at this point, the thing is that they could use help everywhere, probably with the exception of goaltending. Because even on the back end, I was speaking with someone at the Flyers last week, and I was told that they don't think they have a number one guy in their system anywhere. Like they don't project any of the guys that they have to be a true number one defenseman. Now, look, that's subjective. Does a number one mean Makar or Hughes or Hedman or Yossi? Or could a number one mean like what's like a number one who's on the lower side of things, like a Noah Hannafin?
Like Mackenzie Weegar pops into my head.
Yeah,
he's not like a true number one, but if you put him with the right guy, he's a pretty good defenseman.
Yeah,
or like on the top pair.
Yeah, or like a Miro Heiskanen type. But I really like Miro Heiskanen. But I'm just saying, like, I think the way that they're envisioning this back end evolving is a bunch of like 2s and 3s. Is that a recipe for success after you just saw Pietrangelo win a cup and Makar win a cup and Hedman? Who knows, right? But I mean, it's better than the alternative to what they've had. I mean, I think at this juncture, and this is mostly just my speculation, is that York is probably the best shot that they have to be a number one guy. I think that his game is translating pretty well. I think there was a misconception, even within the organization. I was told this last week that even within the organization, there was a misconception of York from what he was supposed to be from the Chuck Fletcher time and then what Tortorella thought he was going to be to now the new regime kind of really making it known to the coaching staff what York is. He's not going to come in and be a rover and on an offensive dynamo. Like he really is like an all-around steady Eddie defenseman. Like not to the same level, but somewhat like a Kimmo Timonen. Like he has some Kimmo Timonen traits in him.
So funny.
And
the exact player that I compared him to back in like 2019.
Exactly. And look, I think Timonen was better offensively, but I think that we all assumed, and look, I was told that people within the front office, a year and a half ago were convinced that he was going to quarterback a power play and be a rover and this and that. And now that they've really kind of shifted their expectations for Cam York. So, I mean, for me, I think that there is still a question mark here that are you going to have a number one guy and is it kind of feasible to translating that into a cup contender? But they have a lot of options here to be a bunch of 2s and 3s.
And he's also 23 years old. So, I mean, look at Travis Sanheim. I feel like defensemen hit their, like, what they're going to be at like 26, 27. Cam York's still 3, 4, 5 years away from that. So I think in his prime, I think Cam York could definitely quarterback or power play when he's 26, 27. I mean, the kid's 23 years old and he went from a player that John Tortorella didn't know if he was going to be an NHL player in the beginning of the year to a month ago calling him the best defenseman on the team.
Yep.
Even with the year that Nick Seeler's having. I mean, that's a huge jump. If he can make that jump in 3-4 months, what's the jump he's going to make in 4 years? You know what I mean? That's my thinking.
Yeah. And it just goes to show is that now we're almost 5 years removed from the 2019 draft. What was the better pick? Cole Caulfield or Cam York? Like, look, Cole Caulfield's going to be a 35, 40-ish goal scorer for a long time in the NHL. But Cam York, to me, is not a number one, but a top pair defenseman in the NHL. So absolutely. What is more important? What's more impactful for the Flyers? And Lord knows that all the Flyers have right now are, right wingers. Owen Tippett and Travis Konechny, Bobby Brink, Tyson Forster. And like, look, I mean, Cole Caulfield's a special player. I'm not trying to like dump all over him, but maybe the Brent Flair and the Philadelphia Flyers saw something in Cam York way back then that is only starting to come to fruition fully now.
I've always liked that pick. That's just me personally, but I do think Danny has a question. Danny?
Yep. I want to ask you about the thought process of the front office right now, because it seems like some fans are a bit concerned at the mixed signals and the shift in messaging as of lately, because the messaging was kind of the same all throughout the entire season. And it seems like last week, I believe there was a Keith Jones interview on, was it Philly Flyers?
I think it was WIP.
Radio show.
Oh, WIP? Okay.
It was WIP.
And ever since then, I'm so sorry. I just want to finish. I just want to say, are the Flyers a bit confused right now, or are they sure of what's ahead?
Look, they're still sure in the sense of they're not moving prospects or first round picks or second round picks or third round picks to bring in rentals and help this team. I think what has maybe shifted a bit here is just them wondering if they're trying to weigh, is it more worth it to sell off assets or to get some of these players playoff experience? I think for them, and probably John Tortorella specifically, they think that the culture would take a major step in the right direction if you get playoff experience for guys like Urson and Frost and Cam York and Joel Farabee and Owen Tippett and Noah Cates and Tyson Forster, because it would kind of show them that they didn't just break their asses all year for nothing. Now, does that mean that if someone offers 2 first-round picks for Sean Walker, they wouldn't take it? For sure they would. But have they kind of prioritized the playoffs a bit more? I do believe so. Is that right or wrong? I mean, if I'm speaking personally, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Because let's be real, guys. Let's say you're in that locker room right now. Do you give a flying you-know-what about the team compiling assets? Let's say you're Owen Tippett or Travis Konechny. Do you care about any of that?
As a player, absolutely not.
Exactly. And you guys have been one of the bigger underdog stories of the year. You know, save for Rick Tocchet, John Tortorella is probably winning coach of the year. You guys are riding high. Everyone expected them to be in the basement of the Eastern Conference. And now you're going to trade, hypothetically, Nick Seeler and Sean Walker. Like, if they trade Nick Seeler and Sean Walker, they may lose every other game the rest of the year. Like, if you're playing Mark Stahl, like, assuming that Ristolainen and Drysdale, look, if Ristolainen and Drysdale weren't injured, I think this would be a lot easier of a discussion. Yeah, because you could have those guys step in and step up a bit. If you move off of Seeler and Walker, let's just say hypothetically, you move off of both of these guys, are they going to win another game with your second pair being Mark Stahl and Igor Zamula, and your third pair being Belpedio and Ronnie Attard, or some combination of that? Like, honestly, do you like? Yeah. And with Felix Sandstrom had a hell of a game, probably the biggest game of his career. He's going to get probably 5 more starts down the line, assuming they don't acquire a backup. Is he going to be able to replicate that behind the defense that I just outlined? And I think they're thinking, is it worth going out and getting a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick for these guys and affecting the locker room like that? Like, will we lose the locker room? And look, this isn't exclusive to the Flyers. Look at what's going on in Calgary. Like, I reported last week that they're not trading Jacob Markstrom anymore because of what kind of message it would send to that room. And that's not even apples to apples, because that's a team that's loaded with veterans who may not be there in the long haul. Like, they have Connor Zary. Aside from him, I don't think they have any impact younger players on that roster. Even the goaltender, Dustin Wolf, he's, I believe, back in the AHL right now because they have Vladar back and Markstrom. Like, from the Flyers' point of view, like, this isn't a team that is just filled with veterans on expiring deals. Like, remember 15-16 when they went on that miracle run and they got in like one of the last days of the year when Steve Mason had that crazy year?
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And then they got just completely stomped out by the Caps in the first round. In hindsight, that year was wasted because what young guys did they have on that team? Nobody. Like, you had the Giroux clan with Simmons and Shannon and all those guys and Voracek. But then you had like Ryan White and Nick Cousins and Boyd Gordon, I think, was kicking around. Belmar, Vandevelde, Medvedev, Gudis, like Manning. You didn't have anyone who was getting part of the future. But you have half a dozen guys on this team that are part of the future, theoretically. And I think for them, they're saying, what is it going to do to the psyche of these guys if we completely cut the legs out from under them?
Yeah, you make a really good point, because before you came on, I was talking to Danny, and I mean, it's kind of changed my thinking a little bit, because I was in the opinion that, hey, trading away one of, or if both Sean Walker or Nick Seeler, if those guys getting traded away makes you a non-playoff team, that I really don't think that you were a playoff team to begin with. I mean, they are now, but like, if that, like, these players going into the season, they knew where the organization was standing. They knew what could happen. later in the season. And I mean, it wouldn't be like these guys would get blindsided if one of Seeler or Walker get traded. But I really do think you make a really good point, and now it's kind of shifting my my thinking, because if they know that Jamie Drysdale and Rasmus Ristolainen are not coming back this year, then yeah, I trading both of those guys. I mean, maybe one of them they could still probably get away with, because Adder coming up and not playing any games kind of screams, "Hey, come up here in case a trade happens and like get used to the room and get used to the system and just chill out for a little bit." But both of those guys, I'm kind of shying away from that now, because you make a really good point. If they know that Ristolainen and Drysdale are probably out for the season, then there's no way that you could potentially go into a playoff run with that squad, with those defensive pairs that you just listed. I mean, Belpedo would definitely get called up, right? Zamula would be in the top 4. Mark Stahl would probably be up there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, and what kind of message would that, like, let's say you're Owen Tippett, and could you guys, do we swear on this show?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
dude. Yeah.
Okay, so if let's say you're own Chris, you're Owen Tippett, Danny, you're Travis Konechny, and I'm Tyson Forster. And post deadline, March 9th, they're just like, okay, guys, second pair, Mark Stahl and Ronnie Addard, and third pair, Zamula and Belpedio. I'm just like, why the fuck am I gonna break half a sweat tonight? Like, are you fucking kidding me? We're gonna get torched. Stallsy's the fucking third ranked guy on the depth chart. Are you fucking kidding me? Brady's cousin over there is logging the most minutes on the PK. Like, are you serious right now? Like, and I know that, like, I think it's sometimes hard for fans to kind of transplant your brain into a locker room setting, but you could play the lowest level beer league ball hockey, i.e. me. That's what I play, because I'm a scrub when it comes to anything athletic. But I mean, if your best players don't show up for a night, you're just like, I don't care. Why do I care? We're going to get kicked. We're going to get our asses kicked anyway. Yeah. And it would be such a shift in culture. And I know that word has been thrown around a lot, and a lot of people are using it too much against Torts. I know some of it's fair, but it would kill that room if you took both those guys off of there. It would really completely deplete that room. And I truly believe that they're worried that it would send the wrong message. That it's just like, okay, we were underdogs. We did all this. We proved it wasn't a mirage. We proved it was sustainable. And then you traded Nick Seeler for a 3rd round draft pick. Like, I think that's what they're weighing as well. Is like, they're not going to send, like, if you trade Sean Walker for a 1st round pick, I think that some guys could understand it. But one person said to me, we're not going to trade these 2 guys off of our roster for lottery tickets, because that would send a really bad message to the room. And it sucks to hear, because in the long term, even that 3rd round pick may hit and it may turn into Braden Point. You never know. But I think for them, it's because of how many young guys who they project to be part of the future would be losing out on valuable playoff experience. And playing meaningful games down the stretch, it matters. It really, really does. Like, you look at what's happened in Buffalo and Ottawa, teams that really did the full scorched earth rebuild, teams that haven't made the playoffs in 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years in the case of the Sabres. And that toxic environment and that acceptance of losing, we saw it here in Philadelphia with Giroux and Voracek and Simmons. And it's not apples to apples. And I'm not saying that hold on to all your pieces, hoard all your assets. It's all about, getting into the 1st round. The only reason I'm even advocating slightly for this is because of what it would do to guys like Tippett, Forster, and all the aforementioned young players on this team.
Let me throw this at you. If would Winnipeg be interested in both Seeler and Walker? Because I'm looking at their line combos now. They got Morrissey, DeMello at the top, Dylan, Neil Pionk, and then Sandberg, Schmidt. If they would be interested in both Seeler and Walker to be thrown in there as their bottom pair, and then we would take a cap hit back in Nate Schmidt, then I think that would be a little bit better than calling Belpedio up or putting Mark Stahl in your top 4. Like, if they make a move where they take back a bad contract in a Nate Schmidt, do you think is Winnipeg even in that consideration for both those guys, or was it just Walker? Because I knew they were in on one of them. I kind of forget.
Yeah, so Winnipeg keeps a lot of things tight to the vest. But what I could tell you about Winnipeg is that they were scouting each other relatively heavily. I know in the past Winnipeg had liked Ristolainen going back to his time in Buffalo, so I wonder if that played a factor in it. But the last I'd heard on Winnipeg is that the Flyers didn't feel that they were a fit, mainly because they don't have a first round pick this year, and they have only one second round pick that belongs to the Canadians. And I don't think Kevin Cheveldayoff, who has historically been a very conservative GM, has an appetite to trade an additional first round pick. So, pardon me, I think the Flyers were scouted. And again, this is mainly speculation, but based on the information I got, I was led to believe that they were scouting some of the younger players that they thought could have equated to a first round pick. And maybe instead of getting a first round pick, you get someone equivalent to that. Like, I know some people threw around Brad Lambert. I heard Chaz Lucius's name as someone that the Flyers were looking at, but I don't think at this juncture, and either of those players were ones that the Flyers deemed the equivalent of a first round pick in value. So the latest I heard on Winnipeg is that the Flyers didn't really think there was a fit there. But obviously, things can change as more and more D come off the board, because to your point, Winnipeg could certainly stand to add to their back end. And in the case of taking back a bad contract to get an NHL body, I think absolutely that's something that the Flyers would do in the event that they move off of the guy. Like, look, this hasn't been presented to the Flyers at this juncture, but I'm pretty certain Edmonton would do a first round pick in Cody Ceci for Sean Walker. So I think that's something that you would see. But Ceci, if I'm not mistaken, has a year remaining on his contract.
I can go look right now for you.
I believe he does. And Ceci historically has not been the greatest of defensemen. And, there was a report, I believe it was from Pierre Lebrun, that the Calgary Flames they decided to not even take an offer they decided to forego, rather, a first round pick for Chris Tanev, because it would have involved them taking back a bad contract. And many people have speculated that it was that exact trade, a first round pick in Cody Ceci for Chris Tanev. So I've heard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I cut you off completely.
No, it was just that I'm because of Edmonton's involvement. My colleague Dave Pagnotta said their first round pick is very much in play, that they would attach a player to it. If you connect some dots here, and it's not that hard to see, I think, and I want to stress that it's not that Edmonton has presented the Flyers formally with this offer, but I'm led to believe that is something that the Flyers that Edmonton would be prepared to do.
So he makes 3.25 this year, and then he makes 3.25 next year, and then he's an unrestricted free agent in 2025. So you'd be taking on another year of him at 3.2 if you don't retain anything.
Yeah,
that is Cody Ceci.
Yeah, so it's a tough situation, because it's also that first round pick is a hot commodity right now. Like, I'll be honest, when this whole trade market started a few months back, I was certain that Chris Tanev would get a first round pick. Like, hey, David Savard and Ben Sherratt got first round picks. Why wouldn't Chris Tanev? But the market has shifted a bit, clearly. So I think the Flyers are exploring ways as to how they could get that first round pick, because I think that is a major thing for them right now. I think that if a first round pick actually comes into play without having to take back a contract like Cody Ceci, I think that changes things drastically for them. I just believe at this point in time, they haven't come into an offer or even have been indicated of an offer where they would bring back a first round pick without having to take on a bad contract.
Potentially 3 first round picks this year, because we have Florida's as well, would be insane. I mean, I personally don't think they would use all 3 picks, but stacking, I mean, for the people who were clamoring for, me and Danny were talking about it before the podcast started, they're messaging in the beginning of the year and how don't fall in love with guys and blah, blah, blah. If you somehow manage to get another first round pick and you have 3 heading into that draft, that's a lot of ammo to do a lot of different things. You can use those picks to go get an active player. You can use those picks to move up in the draft. That gives you a lot of different avenues. And I like the fact that they're kind of gunning for that with Walker, because I really do think, especially because look, Dallas went quantity over quality, right? Dallas, what they give up for for Tanev.
It was a second round pick, defenseman who I believe was a third round pick. And then there was a conditional pick. I think it's a third if they win a Stanley Cup. I believe that was
Yeah, so Artem, I don't know how to say his last name, Grushnikov?
Yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
2024 second, and then a 2026 third round, which is conditional. Pick is only transferred if Dallas advances to the Stanley Cup final. So they went second, third, and then a B, C level prospect instead of the first. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that did kind of set the market because, I mean, I completely agree with you. I really did think Christopher Tanev was going to get a first. I mean, he's an elite defenseman, PK guy. It's just a great ad for Dallas. That's like one of my favorite trades in the last couple of years, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Yep. No, the value is awesome. And they get a guy that I don't know. I haven't seen the pairs yet, but I would imagine you'd slot in beside Essa Lindell, kind of become their shutdown pair. So I've always loved Chris Tanev. I think he meant a lot for Quinn Hughes early on in Hughes' career. Complete warrior. To be honest, he was a free agent in 2020, and he was a guy that I thought the Flyers should have targeted hard after Niskanen retired. I thought he would have been the perfect facsimile to replace Matt Niskanen beside Ivan Provorov. But obviously that is eons ago at this point.
Dan, do you have any more questions for Ant?
Yeah, I actually have one regarding Sean Walker. Is there a middle point to this situation? Is it almost certainly either you're selling him this year for a first round pick or you're looking at a 3 to 5 year extension? Is there a scenario, or are they weighing the option of using him as a rental or letting him expire or trading his rights potentially before July 1st? Or is it just these two options being weighed at the moment?
It's funny because I've been in kind of that camp exactly that you just outlined, Danny. And I was told a few weeks ago that is possible. And to be honest, guys, like if it's between trading Walker for a second round pick or signing him to a 5-year deal at $4.5 million or even 4 years because for me, this is mostly speculation, but just kind of piecing information I've gotten from both sides. They could probably get Walker at 4 years, $4.75 million. For me personally, no, thank you. I say no. You can go ahead. I much rather give Nick Seeler something in the neighborhood of 3 times 3, 3.5. Like that to me is at least digestible because of the style he plays. It's crazy now, but I think the Flyers are actually deeper on the right side with Sanheim shifting over. But I don't think I would trade Walker for a second round pick. And I don't think I would sign him that contract. And I think you keep him, you use him as an own rental, and then you see him walk away in the summer, and then you get it back a healthy Jamie Drysdale and Rasmus Ristolainen next year, and you move on with your life. Like, I don't think that it's going to torpedo the rebuild that they didn't get a second round pick for Sean Walker. No. But I do think it could torpedo the long-term outlook of this team if you lock him in for a 4-year contract. And I think, I could tell you with certainty that is the Flyers' biggest thing right now, is that they are forecasting for when they have to pay Jamie Drysdale and Cam York in 2025. That is the biggest thing. And actually, Drysdale is 2026. They don't want to be boxed into the point where they can't pay these guys. York and Drysdale, and having money for them when they come out of their bridge deals is of utmost importance to them, which is great. But if you sign Sean Walker to a 4-year contract, you're kind of screwing yourself one way or another in that regard. Now, look, obviously, would they probably find a way to move off of Ristolainen? Sure. By that point, you could probably find a taker for, actually, they don't have a lot of money tied up with anyone on that back end right now. Yeah. But it's just, Sanheim. But I mean, at least that contract is fair market value at this point in time. So, I mean, look, for me, guys, personally, I am in that middle group, which Danny kind of asked about. I think that there is a compromise here because I don't think that anyone would be super pissed if, Danny Briere came out and in a moment of complete transparency said, yeah, all I had on the table was a second round pick. I don't think people would honestly lose their minds about that. No. But I do think that if you sign him to a contract that approaches $20 million worth in value, I think some people would. And I think that there is a certain level of acceptability to that outrage if it does get there. But as like for Nick Seeler, if they sign Nick Seeler to a 3-year deal worth $9.5 million, like I don't think that's the end of the world. What about you guys?
That's what I would do. I mean, I said it before you came on. I mean, Danny can vouch for this. I mean, that's what I would do. I would hand Sealer, honestly, whatever he wants. I mean, you can't blame the guy for wanting a pay raise. And you also can't turn around and blame Walker for doing what he's doing. Like, his agent's just trying to get him the best deal, the most money. I mean, look, the guy's having a career year. He's 29 years old. I'm not going to sit here and say I followed Walker his entire career, but I mean, this is kind of an outlier year for him, and he's looking to get the bag. I mean, I can't blame that. But honestly, Danny, that was a great question because I didn't even think, like, that wasn't even in my head. The whole just kind of use him as a rental for the playoffs, keep going, and then just let him go out and hit free agency and get the money that he wants.
Like, would you guys care that much? Like, Danny, like for you, if you were to forego a second round pick for Sean Walker and then let him go for nothing in the summer, is that like a catastrophic failure?
No, actually, I think that's kind of the boat I'm in at this point in time because I think it doesn't sacrifice the short term and it doesn't sacrifice the long term outlook of the team. You keep the team, like, you don't fail the team this season, but in that same token, you're also not getting locked into that 4-year contract. Like you said, I would be fine if the first is not on the table, if they rock with Walker, let him expire, and then re-up Seeler, like you said.
And you got him for free. Like, you got this asset for free. And one other tidbit as to why this negotiation may be a bit more contentious than the Seeler one. Walker's agent is Cam Stewart, who works under Kurt Overhart. Kurt Overhart represented Cutter Gauthier. So I can tell you that has, at least in the minds of the Flyers, played some kind of a role in this. Can't say with 100% certainty because it is Cam Stewart, not Kurt Overhart, but it's the same agency. But another part about this is that Sean Walker really wants to stay. And I can't say with 100% certainty, but I believe that Walker may have even pushed his camp to take a bit less and move off of $5 million AAV to stay because he likes it that much in Philadelphia. So there's a lot of factors going on with this Walker negotiation that are kind of beneath the surface.
We've talked a lot about Sean Walker and a lot about Nick Seeler. The whole Scott Laughton camp is extremely silent right now. Are they staying pat with that first round pick for him? Like, is that why it's so quiet with him?
Yeah, because with Scott Laughton, I don't think that the market is ever going to completely die on him. And now teams have pivoted to Wenberg, who's being, he will be traded in the coming days. Adam Henrique is expected to go. They're pending UFAs. I think for the Flyers, they're saying we have this guy under contract for another 2 years at $3 million. The cap is going to be over $90 million by his last year on his contract. That first round pick is never going to go anywhere. And I think for the Flyers, it's not like an asset you're going to lose. Like, they were able to get a first round pick last year. Now back right before the draft. Now they're kind of, I guess, having a tougher time. For me personally, like, I don't even think Scott Laughton is a center in a top 9 capacity. I think he's a fourth line center or a third line winger. But yeah, it seems like on the Laughton front, it has died down because the Flyers didn't get close to a first round pick. And for that one too, I can't really blame them all that much because do you want to give Scott Laughton away on term for a second round pick? Like, I spoke to 2 other GMs a month ago, and they both said that the Flyers shouldn't move off of him for anything less than a first round pick because of the contract and the cost certainty and what kind of competitor he is on the ice. So for that one, I can't blame them at all.
I mean, Adam Henrique makes $5.8 million. Like, if he gets traded, I would be extremely interested to see what he would return. Because like you said, Scott Laughton, I'm not hating on Scott Laughton. I mean, the dude's been around since I was like 12, 13 years old. I feel like it's been 20 years, but good, solid player. Like you said, he's not a center in a top 9 role, but $3 million with the cap going up, it's a really good cap, especially considering the centers, quote unquote, that are in the market right now.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah, like Adam Henrique, who's 34 years old and makes $5.8 million. Like, if I'm Danny Briere, I'm sitting there like, go ahead, go trade for Adam Henrique, dude. Like, he's not that good anymore. I have Scott Laughton. here, who's 29 years old on a $3 million contract. So yeah, I mean, you can't sit there for being like first round pick, or I'll just keep him. But
Yeah.
I guess it's just about the fan talking to me. I'm just so tired of watching that guy skate in the Flyers. I'm sorry.
Me too, honestly. But anyway, guys, I got to run. But
thank you for coming on, man. Really, this was awesome.
No worries. And honestly, it felt good to get back in the podcast game. I haven't done a podcast and I honestly don't even remember. I don't.
It's like you didn't even leave, dude.
You're always welcome on here, man.
That's it. I always make time for my boys. But
appreciate you, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, man. Enjoy the deadline. Take it easy, guys.
You too.
Thank you so much.
That was awesome.
Incredible.
Thank you, Anthony, for coming on. That was sick. Completely changed my thinking on the whole Seeler and Walker situation. How about you?
Laughton as well. I'm going to be honest.
And Laughton. Yeah.
Or maybe not completely shifted my thinking, but just gave me more insight to put in the equation and consider, and instead of just thinking about it the way I've been thinking about it. Like I'm open to that. I like getting some insight, reevaluating. That was fun, man.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome. Before we wrap it up, I mean, we can just go through a couple questions from our listeners.
We actually didn't we have a lot?
A lot, yeah. But I mean, most of them are kind of the same. So I'll just Justin asks, considering Tyson Forster's recent emergence offensively, how do you view him today? What kind of player do you expect him to be within the next few seasons? I thought that was a pretty good question because Tyson Forster was for me personally, rookie 21-year-old kid coming in here. I mean, I personally think he's one of the best board battlers, 1v1 guys. I mean, I feel like that kid's constantly come out of the corners with the puck. It's obvious what he was doing. He was trying to impress Tortorella for the first half of the year, show him that he could play defensively, and now we're starting to see the offensive merge. Like I genuinely think that Tyson Forster could be a 30-goal guy if he hits his ceiling. If he doesn't hit his ceiling and he continues on whatever path that he's on, I mean, he could be a 20, 25 goal scorer who is extremely good defensively. I mean, there's always room for a guy who's solid defensively and can pot you 25, 30 goals. So I've always liked Tyson's game. I was never really worried about him this year. I think it was just pretty obvious what he was doing, how he was trying to show and do on the defensive side of the game. But that's just me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest concern with him since his draft was away from the puck, everything away from the puck.
Yeah.
I know the shot was there, but the skating was the biggest thing, and just his play away from the puck. And we saw it through the first 20, 30 games of the season. He did everything except score. And Tortorella, he mentioned it, and I know in the moment it was like, okay, bro. But he kept mentioning like that when the goals come, this is scary, this is promising. Then the goals start flowing in. You start to see the full body of what Tortorella was talking about in game 20 when he said when the goals come, because we're not worried about his goal scoring. We were worried about the other things, and he put them to bed first and foremost.
I mean, 9 goals in his last 9 games, dude. I mean, he completely took over that game.
Looks super confident. He looks super confident. That
he
shot.
Does. Like, he's taking the puck into the middle of the ice. He's shooting in the middle of the ice. He's actually, I mean, he's not the world's greatest playmaker. He's never going to be labeled as that, but I feel like he's been better at that, and I feel like he has better playmaking ability than most people give him credit for. But I really like Forster. I mean, he's 21. I mean, we're talking about a rookie here. Well, he's 1 goal away from tying Connor Bedard's 17 goals for rookies. So I mean, we're talking about a kid here, basically. So if this is what he's doing in his rookie year, then who knows what he is when he's 25, right?
Who knows what he is when he's getting cross ice feeds from Matvei Mishkov? Who knows? Imagine that power play. Jesus.
No. Imagine any competent power play. That'd be fucking cool.
It would be cool. Maybe we would have a chance at the cup this year.
Our boy Adam. Chris, how's mom doing? Mom is doing really good, Adam. I appreciate you asking. I just wanted to read that question because I wanted to thank everybody who reached out on Twitter. You know who you are. It was like 150 people. I really do appreciate the outpour of support that you guys all showed for my mom. So I really do appreciate that. But she's doing really good, man. She had some pancakes and eggs this morning, some solid food. And fingers crossed, the doctors are thinking about sending her home tomorrow. So really good. Thank you, Adam. I kind of already asked your question, Jack, Would you make this trade, Walker and Seeler to Winnipeg for Chaz Lucic, a Montreal second, and Nate Schmidt? Kind of asked Anthony that question. We kind of dove deep into that, so I hope you like that. Seamus, not deadline related, but what are y'all's confidence levels in Urson? Are you worried about the big games, or was a Stadium Series a fluke? Personally, I'm never worried about a goalie in the Stadium Series game. Like, that's such a weird environment for a goalie to go into and play.
In general, let's not honestly. Don't put any stock into any outdoor games. Like, let's just erase that game from our memory. Those games are always weird. The ice is always weird. It doesn't flow the same as an arena game. You know what I mean? Like, it is. Those are just weird little events that you get 2 points for. But I'm not putting stock into that. A lot of the New Jersey goal. I mean, we outplayed them that game. I mean, shit. In my opinion, we should have won that game. The score misleading.
Yeah, I missed the first 15 minutes of the first period because I was out for my mom's birthday. But from what I heard, I mean, we got off to a pretty slow start. It was a pretty rocky start. But yeah, I agree with Danny. The Stadium Series in terms of, especially goalies, like, I'm not just talking a whole team. Goalies, like, that environment is so fucking weird for them. So, no, like, my confident level, I mean, he's a rookie, right? Like, we're going to sit here, we're going to talk, but we just talked about Tyson Forster. Sam Erson's also a rookie. Like, we have to remember that. So, that's why Sandstrom is so vital for this last stretch of games. He's going to get 5 or 6 games to finish out the season. And that's why I wouldn't mind if they traded a 3rd, 4th round pick for a goalie with term coming up in this trade deadline. I mean, I feel like a lot of people would overreact to that and see, they're buying. But yeah, no, my confidence level in Erson's high. I mean, like I said, he's a rookie. He's really good. Like, Sam Erson's a very good goalie. So, got thrown into the fire after the Hart situation. So he's impressed the fuck out of me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm confident in him going in there and getting a chance to prove it. Because like you said, he's a rookie. There's a lot of question marks. I think he's earned that chance, and I'm confident in him going into game 1 against Carolina until he disproves it. If he folds, like if it's game 3 and he's getting lit up, then I'll revisit that confidence, of course, but
I feel like a lot of these questions were answered with Anthony, which is awesome. Like, a lot of these questions are, Gray asked question: why do the Flyers hate us? They don't hate us, man. They're 3rd in the Metro. Come on. But like most of these questions were just: do the Flyers make multiple trades or one big one? Is it a mistake that the Flyers do nothing? Like, a lot of these we hit. In those 40 minutes Anthony was on, it felt like 10.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of those are very, I don't know how to answer it. Like, if they do nothing but nothing was on the table, what can you do? If they do nothing but I found out a first was on the table, okay, maybe. Like, you see what I mean? Like, it's so situational.
Garrett, with Barkey now on his ELC, which we haven't talked about yet, any chance of him playing in Lehigh next year? He's not old enough to play in Lehigh next year, so it's either he makes the team out of camp miraculously because he looks like he's still in middle school, or he's definitely going to go back to junior. So, no, there's no chance of him playing with the Phantoms next year. He's 18 years old. You have to be at least 20 to play with them. Also, any chance of Samu Tuamala getting called up after the trade deadline, especially with Atkinson play declining? What do the Flyers do with Atkinson? Samu, no. Like, I've always been under the impression that I think he should be down there for the entire year, given his bouncy play, if you will, in Europe over the last couple of years. So I think him getting a full year in the AHL in a pro league would be just terrific for his development. And he's been really good this year. Lately, he hasn't been as good. I think he has 2 assists in his last 10 games or something like that. So if I had my personal opinion, no, I don't think Samu would come over. But I mean, come over. What is he, Mitch Cobb? Get called up. But
I agree with the thinking, just because it took him so long to get this comfortable and get the confidence that he's building right now. I don't want to throw him into another fire on top of that,
exactly.
And then potentially see him take a step back.
He's got 37 points in 52 games. He's 2nd on the Phantoms in points, 13 goals. Very good season for a kid that many had as a bust a year ago. So another guy, Email Andre, 28 points, 43 games, 4 goals, 24 assists. So I mean, he's another rookie. I think you'd see Email before you would see Samu. So we already have Ronnie out. We talked to Ann about that. I kind of think that's hey, come up here and he hasn't played yet. Come up here and chill, get used to the system, and like you might see some games if we trade Seeler or Walker kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's too many guys on the Phantoms that you would see because like if they do trade somebody, it sounds like it's going to be either one of Walker or Seeler because it doesn't sound like Laughton's going anywhere.
Anthony made a great point about the state of the depth chart, and it's something that
caught me. I'm not going to lie.
It's something that like it definitely was a thought, but it's until you put deep thought into the structure of the lineup after the fact, then it really starts to hit home. It's like, okay, I can
where
see,
they are.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I made it a whole thing. I was like, why are they changing their messaging? Why does it seem like they're pulling back on dealing a Walker and Seeler? And injuries will do that. Like if you're third in the Metro and your defensemen are getting fucked up, you want to hold on to the ones that aren't injured. And like that absolutely makes sense. And I it's obvious, but it's something like once I thought about it deeper, I was like, oh, okay, like I see the point.
Yeah, definitely the whole if Risto and Dramey were in the lineup healthy right now, then I think that Walker is probably definitely gone. I think Seeler would have the chance to go too. So yeah, like I said, that kind of caught me. Like I honestly I didn't even think about that. So really good point by Anthony. But I think that's all the questions, Danny. I think that's it. We're an hour 17 in. Pretty good pod.
Absolutely. So are we wrapping it up right here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been episode 108 of the Liberty-O. You can follow us on all socials at the Liberty-O. Follow us on Twitter or X at TOI Danny, at Chris Stumps.
And go Floor.